It is indeed a privilege to be here today, speaking with all of you and discussing a topic that is often controversial, but in today's day and time, very hard to ignore. Thank you, CSRBOX, for including this very pertinent agenda in your summit. And I welcome my fellow panelists, Abhishek, Ekta, Prachi, and Sujata, who will bring their extensive experience and expertise to this discussion today. Education technology, more commonly referred to as Edtech, has demonstrated potential to help combat the learning crisis by augmenting traditional learning practices. Technology can support and empower teachers, engage and provide agency to students, and meaningfully involve parents and families in the teaching learning process. Technology can also collect data to provide valuable insights into how students learn. And emerging global evidence has shown that EdTech can support learning in a big way here in India, as well as across the world. Catalytic growth, disruption, innovation are afoot in this sector, riding now on the wave of the increased awareness and demand due to the pandemic. EdTech was the mainstay of school education during the pandemic. And now as schools reopen, it is important to discuss and identify the key imperatives for EdTech-based learning to support and strengthen our education system. One of the big challenges that India faced during school closure was the lack of access to devices and connectivity for the purposes of learning. The system dealt with issues ranging from no access at a household level to limited access, interrupted access. And while the data is promising, which shows that smartphone penetration in rural UP is almost 40% and has penetration over the last 4 years has jumped by almost 25%. The digital divide is real in the current day scenario. We also believe that it is important to continue with blended learning between home and school to bridge the learning loss, which has happened over the last year and a half. Many governments, CSRs, and philanthropies have engaged with device distribution programs as well. I would call upon Sujata and Ekta to discuss the issues of digital divide, their experiences of the key elements to make a program effective, and some of the pitfalls that can be avoided, that can inform many distribution programs going forward. Sujata.
Yes, hi. Thanks, Gouri. Thanks, CSRBOX. And hello to all my fellow panelists. Great to see you all again. So yeah, I work in one of the most challenging geographies of the country. So I guess I'm quite qualified to talk about EdTech challenges. Before I start on with this, so I work in Ladakh, and largely connectivity is not something that we use in our day-to-day language at all. We just assume there is none. But I wanted to start by actually, we talked about data, Gouri. I wanted to throw some light on this data. In a recent report in the Lok Sabha, when there was actually asked a question on how many villages really are out of connectivity, it's quite shocking actually. According to that report, there's some 37,000 census villages which do not have basic 3G, 4G. I'm talking of census villages. This doesn't even count the tiny hamlets, out of which 25,000 villages do not even have basic 2G connectivity. And here's the, when we talk about device access, when we talk about digital divide, we talk about lack of access to devices, families not being able to afford a device or have one, they can't have a data plan. There are so many issues. But I really wanted to talk about those areas which don't even have this option, because the basic connectivity, which is largely provided by the government, has not reached so many remote villages. The other interesting thing I'll say this is, did you know that actually almost every state in the country has a significant number of villages which are outside the connectivity zone? I think the only ones which don't fall under this are, there are about 4 states, that's Chandigarh, Puducherry, Delhi, and I think one more state. These are the only 4 states which are like completely connected 2G or otherwise. Otherwise, barring these 4 states, every other state has few villages that are outside the connected zone. And the majority of the villages which are outside the connected zone fall in the Northeast or the Indian Himalayan region. So for example, in Ladakh, there's 66% of villages that don't have access to 3G connectivity or 4G connectivity. And it's the same in so many places. In these kind of areas, none of the solutions that were being tried by states and state governments and philanthropists or non-profits elsewhere were able to work. What has really hit the answer home hard is the fact that there isn't any solution at all to address this. So what our states, the states that I work in, like there's Sikkim as well as Ladakh, there's 2 states that 17,000 feet is working in. We've had to resort to, our governments have had to resort to, door-to-door learning, distribution of worksheets, or completely offline learning, just distribution of tablets, but no way of tracking what a child is doing, which kind of loses the purpose of, trying to understand what the child is doing. We look at Edtech solutions, there are so many. I mean, I think at the start of the pandemic, we even talked about radio, loudspeakers, TVs. We had so many solutions. We were all grappling, and the sector's all very hard. But I think when you want to talk about digital divide, there needs to be a much larger noise about those states and children who fall outside the zone. And that much isn't being said, because on the whole, if you look at it, if I just look at these 25,000 or 37,000 villages that don't have access to 2G or 3G, there is a potential 7 million children that are not there at all, that are not even being addressed. And that's a small percentage compared to the larger number of children who don't have access to devices. So, but I think we need to talk about that and the solutions that are being addressed today. And before I get into what 17,000 feet did, I think I'll hand it over to Ekta to talk a little bit about the areas that she works in, where they've also dealt with no connectivity, but also lack of access to devices, because I think both are equally pertinent. Ekta, over to you.
Thanks, Sujata. Thanks, CSRBOX. Thanks, Gouri. And hello to all co-panelists, and a warm welcome to the audience that's made time to talk about this or listen into such a pertinent topic that's there for us today. I think children are the future of our country or of the world. And, that's the space where we all have a huge opportunity to make a difference by pitching in, by helping them learn. And COVID has really, really set them back. As in, I say this not just as a professional, but I say this as a mother. I say this as a very active societal member who contributes to a couple of NGOs who work in the education sector. And I could see that this pandemic was really setting us back by a couple of years, as in the rigor that RTE has brought in, the rigor that, technology had brought in terms of at least giving access to content that was available to everybody on a more, liberal basis. All that suddenly went out because of this pandemic. I think I'd like to build on some of the statistics that Sujata just shared with all of us. One of the interesting pieces for me was that, when I looked at availability of mobiles, the data was really, really heartening, in the sense that in 2018, the devices that were there in every household were around, of government school parents, were around 30% of the households had it, and that suddenly changed to 60% by 2021. So we saw the device penetration really increase, and that's thanks to a lot of effort by both corporates and the government. Everybody made a lot of efforts to give tablets, mobiles, etc. However, availability and access don't mean the same thing, right? As in having a device in the household versus actually being able to use that device is a different thing altogether. So what the data suggests, and this is an ACER report that came out in 2021, the data suggests that only 1/4 of the students had access to it during the learning hours or during the school hours. Half of them had a patchy access to it during the school hours, and 1/4 of them didn't have any access to those devices. So imagine our families where every person in the family has almost access to 2 devices. We'll have a laptop and a mobile. And this is a family that we're talking about that has just one device, which the father, mother, and the children are sharing. So this data is not very surprising for me, at least, as in, that 1/4 of them never had access to it is not surprising, because the parents carried it with them to work when they stepped down. Now, I think the piece that we also need to recognize that while this gap exists, there's a lot of work that happened on the content side of it. We saw a lot of students, lots of teachers, whether it is somebody in DPS or in the IIT or was just studying, came forward to start creating content because they said that, okay, fine, at least let me create that content so that the student can listen to me and know more about a particular topic. So the problem statement on content then suddenly did not exist. And there was enough and more content out there on YouTube, on WhatsApp being pushed out. So that bit I think we did very well, as in it was like a leapfrog journey over the last 1.5 years, where there's a lot of content out there. But as I said, devices does not mean access. So that continues to same. Building on what Sujata said, and even if you have access and you don't have a 2G or a 3G network, then there is a further enhanced challenge to it that there's a device but no network access. But however, I would like to say that, wherever there were possibilities, I saw a lot of schools and a lot of teachers trying to engage the students through the offline modes. One of the pieces that I noticed was giving assignments, as in giving them assignments so that they can, fill in their sheets and write what they know, and then the teachers are checking it and giving them feedback. Then they're doing their little bit of homework offline. But all said and done, at the end of the day, I don't think we as panelists over here are really going to be able to give a one, shoe fits all kind of a solution that will work, because the challenges are far many. And it's an opportunity for all of us in this panel to kind of recognize these challenges and maybe do some advocacy together, where the government, the corporates, and the citizens will need together to kind of solve them. I pass it back to Gouri.
Thanks so much, Ekta. Sujata, do you want to come in now and just share some of the good practices that
Sure.
you witnessed with device distribution programs?
So yeah, like I said, I see changes happening in, instead of looking at streaming video content, which is very data heavy and so on and so forth, we're looking at WhatsApp based solutions. We're looking at SMS based solutions. Those are not that data heavy. And so they're seeing a lot of rise in that. And there's a huge WhatsApp based solution. There's a big penetration of that's going on. But again, it still doesn't address what happens in the areas where there is absolutely not even a 2G connectivity. Like I told you, there are like 25,000 villages. What we've done in Ladakh, for example, is we've had to devise a very hyper-local kind of a solution, which is largely we don't have internet. We can give an offline solution, but the offline solution is it's no use if there's no feedback, if there's no tracking or monitoring. So we've had to innovate. I think what this has given rise to is innovation. 17,000 feet has actually created a solution where, while it is a tablet-based solution, we've actually provided the electricity to the schools, because even that's a problem, by the way, even that's a basic thing. And while the solution is offline in the tablets, we build a mechanism where it can also be monitored, because we rely on the fact that in these remote areas, people actually move from one village to another. So if a headmaster is moving from one village to his zonal office just to, get his books or get the salaries or whatever, why can't the data? So we've actually built apps which will reside on the headmaster's phone, which will connect to the data on the tablets in the school. Then he travels, he connects it, and it goes up to the cloud, and there's a feedback, and the new assessments or whatever are pushed down in. So to do all of this, we've had to do things like put little servers in schools, which network all of the tablets together, even without an internet. I'm saying it's worked pretty well. It's worked pretty well, but we're doing it in small pockets. Right now, we've been also, asked to do the same in Sikkim as well. I don't think that is enough. While I agree with Ekta, a lot has been done in device penetration. I don't think enough has been done with basic access to connectivity. And I think that's a far larger and more difficult problem to solve. And I think only innovations like what we've done or small scale solutions will work. And what we are doing right now, for example, is trying to work with our state governments to help scale it up, because they're the ones who have the power to do this. I think governments rely on NGOs for the creative solutions, and that's what we are focusing on.
Great.
So yeah, that helps. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Sujata. And
Sure.
I mean, a lot needs to be discussed on this topic. I think innovation is key, right? And what I also heard from Ekta is that it's not only about the device, but the right content and engagement metrics that need to be layered in to ensure the children are actually engaging with the solution. Changing tracks a little bit. I think today there are as many believers as there are skeptics of Edtech, right? And the reason why Edtech may be invoking such polarized views is that there is very limited evidence on what works.
Yeah.
And there are different facets of the efficacy, right? Does a particular type of Edtech work? When I introduce it into a system setting, will it be effective? What is the scale model that will actually work? And the market is also extremely crowded today, right? And it becomes very difficult to actually discern quality. So, Prachi, we would love to hear from you as to how you think of this issue from your portfolio perspective. And what are some of the trends that you're observing on EdTech evidence and the initiatives to remove information asymmetry in decision making for EdTech?
Thanks, Gouri, and a very warm hello to everyone who's present today for this important discussion. And, we've set up the stage with Sujata and Ekta sharing a very grim reality, which is just the reality of the ecosystem in which we work and the children for whom we want to make the difference. So I'll say that, I'm neither a believer nor a skeptic. I'm an action-oriented skeptic. Because I just think the promise that the EdTech holds is huge, right? I mean, some of the kids that we've never been able to reach, some of the geographies we've never been able to reach, Sujata knows it better than anyone else on the panel today, is that, it is hard for us to be able to deliver on that promise of quality, without technology. So we have to make it work. Is it working today? I would say the evidence is very thin, Gouri, and I don't have almost anything to say on trends because the evidence collection is also very thin. There are very few organizations which are actually working on that. That said, I did want to share some of Michael and Susan Dell Foundation's work and evidence that we created through our work, which is of course really small because it's just within the scope of the work we support. So on the engagement, what we found is that the kind of models that Sujata was talking about and, the challenges that both Sujata and Ekta were talking about, which is where, they don't have the devices, we don't have the connectivity, we neither have the motivation or, whatever I choose to call it, motivation is probably, we just don't have that environment in which, we log in at a certain time or at a certain point of time. Is also, in the absence of all of that, what we found is in terms of engagement, and I'll come to some concrete data on learning outcomes as well. In terms of engagement, two or three things that I found worked really well. One is we found that some element of scheduling works really well. Because otherwise, when you're at home, especially in the pandemic situation, and post-pandemic, it might change. In the pandemic situation, everybody was looking for some semblance to their life pre-pandemic. So where we found the highest engagement was where there was some schedule. Haryana and Himachal, two states that we work very closely, they had the slogan, "Das se 12 ghar se school chale hamara," right? And just registered with the parents. "Das se 12 ghar se school chale hamara," you have to log in at 10 o'clock. It wasn't synchronous classes or anything. Teachers were doing synchronous classes on their own, but new content was being sent at 10 a.m. every day, at 10 to 12. Somehow you created that space and made that message to the parents that, look, make kids study and sit down, do the worksheet, do whatever, watch the video between 10 to 12. And then every Saturday we'll send you a quiz. And we had in Himachal as high as 95% kids participating on the Saturday quiz. Just because there was this routine. I get content every day between this time. So I thought, some element of scheduling really helps. The second thing which really helps is to suit it to the customer, which is our children living in those environments. And again, over there, I think familiarity with the technology, with the existing environment, technically also really helped. So the biggest uptake that we saw was for WhatsApp-based solutions. And that was, I think, probably the smartest things that some of the states did. They quickly organized the kids, the teachers in WhatsApp groups, and teachers started sending it. And, like in states like Himachal, the penetration of WhatsApp amongst teachers were 95%. And, in parents was also, it's a different state. It's not comparable to the rest of the country in terms of, its economic indicators as well. But there, close to 70-75% kids were on the WhatsApp groups, whether through their own phone or through someone else. And then if you get smart around it, in terms of using the asynchronous time, we were finding, like I said, 95% of the kids engaging on the quiz. So delivering something on existing platforms, we also found had a direct connection to engagement versus asking them to download new apps, especially, at that time. And I think, connected to scheduling, connected to this thing, the whole, how to make asynchronous work. I think, solutions coming with the legitimacy of coming from the school or legitimacy of coming from your teacher also had the highest level of uptake. We were funding a whole bunch of different types of education interventions. And we found that the engagement was highest when it was coming from the teacher, when it was coming from your school, it was connected to your curriculum, versus a lot of other not-for-profits who were trying to do it on the side, right? And they may or may not know the kids, but that's where, so these are the three things that we found on the engagement bit. On learning outcomes, it's a journey, but I'll share some data that we actually collected. So we took a controlled experimentation of 3 different types of interventions. The first one was this WhatsApp-based intervention, where we looked at children who were receiving content over WhatsApp channels, and the only feedback loop was the Saturday quiz, content-related Saturday quiz that they were performing in. Second intervention was a blended intervention where the organization actually provisioned tablets to children and then was giving them live classes as well as some work to be done on their own in an asynchronous fashion. And the third was a completely student-led, self-directed. One of the mainstream Edtech solutions was free subscription was provided to them with a lot of nudging to log in and use and that. Surprisingly, we would have thought that the second one will have the highest impact. We actually found the third one had the highest impact. And the first and the second one had similar impact and low impact. So, that I feel gives us some hope, because it is possible to scale solutions, but this is 1 year, this is 6 months of data, all of those disclaimers. But it was good to see that student-directed self-learning type of models can also work. What it had was very heavy element of nudging. So counselors were calling and they were asking you to log in. Facilitation and hand-holding and all was happening. And there are many more facets of it that I can discuss, but let me just pause there by throwing 2 pieces of information that I thought would be good for everyone to know about.
No, thanks, Prachi. That's incredibly useful. I think one of the struggles which every Edtech solution faces is the ability to engage the user, right? And without engagement, frankly, there can be no learning, right? So these insights on engagement are very useful. I also want to call out one initiative that CSF has been working on and supporting IIT Bombay with, which is called Edtech Tulna, right? And the hypothesis or the context of this is that, there's a lot of information asymmetry about EdTech in the ecosystem. And at last count, there were about 5,000 EdTech products in the country, and everybody has a different perception of what EdTech means, right? So for, some it could mean a tool for self-learning, for someone it could mean a digital classroom, there is frankly, and what is required from each of these solutions is very different. Right? So what Tulna is trying to do is to almost create standards for what is good in these different use cases of EdTech. And it also creates, in some ways, a scale to assess what is good, right? And the idea is that governments, CSRs, philanthropies, investors, when they are making decisions about which EdTech to procure, invest in, can look at Tulna as a framework to figure out whether the design principles that are used in developing a particular EdTech product are effective or not. Tulna is also actually putting out evaluations of products in the public domain, right? And it's great to see good response from the product ecosystem to even participate in a public evaluation like Tulna. So just wanted to call out that in addition to learning outcome evaluations, at almost going a little bit downstream to say that look, has the product been built right? And Tulna is one of the ways which is assessing that. But again, changing tracks because there are so many things to discuss in Edtech. With the schools shut.
Sorry, can I interrupt for 1 sec?
Go ahead.
Just two seconds. I just wanted to tell Prachi as well. Prachi, we found similar learnings and learning outcomes in our solutions as well. And interestingly, your choice number 3, student-led, had the highest impact as well, as opposed to the blended learning. It was a very interesting learning for us, the kind of outcomes we saw. Children almost achieving almost 100% in their learning outcomes. It was quite surprising. This was done in a very sustained pilot for a few months. So it's actually very interesting to hear that from you as well.
Yeah,
so yeah, we should exchange notes. Yeah.
I will offline connect with you, Sujata. It's kind of
we should.
Pause for us also.
Yeah. So this is great, Sujata. Thank you for sharing. So I think with schools shut, right, parents became central to children's learning at home.
Yeah.
And that was also reflected in data which suggests that about 75% of the children received help from either parents or older siblings at home. And even for children where both parents had less than 5 years of schooling, 55% of them received support at home, showing the value that parents give to education, right? And I'm just quoting from ASAR 2021. And as we begin to think of the way forward, even as schools reopen, blended learning in some ways will become inevitable, right? And there is a need to seamlessly extend learning from home to school, or rather from school to home, and empower students to problem solve independently. While at home learning took center stage during the pandemic, it's expected to outlast it, right? So I would love actually to hear from all my panelists, starting with Abhishek, on some of the good practices that we have observed with blended learning, the collaborations that different stakeholders should think of, and comments on the way forward with blended learning. Abhishek, if we can start with you and then go around the table.
Yeah, thank you, Gouri, and thank you everyone for sharing your thoughts. It was really nice to hear all of you kind of bringing different dimensions to it. The kind of blended technology I'm using at this point of time, my video is on with my laptop and audio is coming from my mobile because something happened with Zoom and didn't allow me to connect, right? So that's a technology for us, right? Even for people like us who live technology. And that talks about the challenges what we have. Now, when we look at technology, right, the baseline, if you look at what it was before 2020, when we have to compare the baseline in India versus some of the developed countries, and since we work in a global environment, definitely the baseline has moved up, right? I'm the one of the optimistic lot here. So, I really want to kind of call it out. Whether it's a digital divide, whether it's adoption of technology, because I remember last year, around 2,500 teachers signing up for digital literacy program with Microsoft. That's a kind of interest we have seen from stakeholders, right? All of us on this call, including me, will have multiple digital devices, right? Even if we can kind of lend one of our digital device to people who need, probably a large portion of problems will be solved, right? That's what initiative we did, right? It's like, hey, can you lend one of your device which you're not using, because many of us have multiple phones. And I think having 2 phones is like a common thing now, right? That's a divide we're talking about. The divide we're talking about is that when parents are available, right? I think very rightly you said that the parents has to be a biggest stakeholder and the teachers as well, because, being in a private school or a government school, children are children, right? We all see it at home, what happens when the online classes happens, right? Including when I teach MBA students, what happens, right? So that's a challenge. So I think the point which a couple of you, Ekta, I think mentioned was, how do we make it interesting? How do we make it engaging? That's the biggest challenge you have on an online platform, Because until unless it's a rewarding, some kind of interest built in it, chances of participation is very, very low, right? And what is in for teachers, right? I mean, they're not pressurized by someone to kind of do an online classes, right? But I think the whole ecosystem where the same teachers has to look after their kids at home, where probably most of them are studying in a private school, being very candid about it. They also need to learn it because they have to kind of, adopt to the kind of, and these are the practical examples. I have seen many teachers coming up, signing up for a program, right? What we have realized that, in the whole process is that if, we make it your content, your program interesting, even on, participation is very high because, you typically 5 to 10% of students in any setup would be self-motivated and they will do, in any situation, they will do very well. But we are talking about the 90% lot, which needs extra nudges, which needs some motivations, right? There are three types of problems which we, kind of encountered during this whole pandemic, and it was a learning by itself. You have one set of children who has at least one smartphone or one device access at home. You have another set of children who may not have ever have even access to a basic internet, not because they don't have internet, because the affordability to even recharge 50 rupees, it's a big deal. And the third set of children which we encountered that they don't have at all anything, none of these, right? So when we're talking about learning outcomes, I think we have to be really kind of, it's not like a one size fits all kind of a solution we need to build it, right? Someone talked about WhatsApp. I think it was a miracle for every one of us, right? I think digital and technology was the only savior for all of us during the pandemic, right? Think about if technology would have not adopted by us in a large scale, what have been the solution? How would you order your Zomato food or whatever you order, right? So I think technology has really improved over the years. I think whatever we can say, but I think the access to technology in India has far more cheaper than any part of the world, far more reachable, right? It's just that maybe some part of the country still is kind of adopting it. So I think what is a learning of we had and what is going forward is that one thing is kind of already accepted that future is about blended learning. Look at the edtech space in a private sector. The kind of growth in the last 2 years most of the edtech companies have seen is phenomenal. The names, I don't have to take their names. I think that's a future going forward where learning doesn't stop, right? I mean, whatever time of the day you want to learn, you have someone to help you. The second part of it is very important is that the content is available. There's a lot of products is available, a lot of content is available. But I think still, if you look at, if you go to YouTube, how many videos you get in the regional languages? The language is still is a concern because a school in Karnataka is not going to watch English or in a government school setup. So I think the vernacular language adoption for content creation, especially the videos, is going to be still a long way to where we see today, right? Uh, the other aspect is what we see is that while we can give a lot of gadgets and technology to the students, but how do we ensure that the parents are becoming a stakeholder? Because for earlier days, parents are working to school, they don't know what's happening, right? On all across, right? But today, I think the school has reached to your bedroom or wherever they are studying, right? That's the kind of synergies we have seen. Now, if the parents and teachers become a stakeholder in your whole program, I think the impact will be far much higher, right? And if we can motivate, children, in a ways like, I can give you some examples, right? So we used to run weekly basis master maker, mess maker challenge, right? If you kind of submit your videos or whatever projects you got for that week, there'll be something reaching to your home by Amazon, right? Because that's the only option we had to kind of give them the gifting. So there was an interest on it. Okay, something is coming my way if I do something good. Until unless we build that, I think formal classroom teaching was very poor, right? For the children who didn't have an access to smartphone, I think the Delhi government has started very recently. I think you all have heard about it. But something we did it last year, that hey, one volunteer will take 30 minutes every day and call one student for 1 month. It could be anything. It could be just teaching vocab. It could could be issues at home, you're discussing something, anything you want to do, right? So those students whom we could reach only through a basic phone without internet access, we could do that. The third piece which we did was, what about the children? There are like 40 to 60% different, depends upon the regions we operate, would not have any of these access. Even they have a smartphone at home, but it will not be available because parents are working and it won't be available during the daytime. What will you do with them? Are you going to keep them away from your programs? So we could actually deliver a lot of content, a lot of books, a lot of sports material, a lot of games to their home to keep them engaged, because mental health became a very big issue during the pandemic for children, because they're not engaging themselves in some way. And one of the fascinating things which we found during this whole initiative was that the girls' participation in online classes was 60%. The boys were 40%. This is a data which we have across the board. The reason was that the boys were able to go out in the field at nearby, gullies to play, but actually girl students were made to do a lot of housework, supporting mother, families, and they found this is a good way to come out of that and kind of engage in something, create something more meaningful. So one thing I think is technology has proven that if you really want to kind of do more of a girl education empowerment kind of project, technology adoption has really worked. And I was very proud to see that the numbers were 60-40, which is other way around when you do a physical education, right? So these are the few initiatives has worked for us. What's moving forward is going to be, how do we make solutions which are cheaper? How do we make solutions which are scalable? How do you make tablets which is affordable? How do we make some of these different silos of products or different silos of content is available? How do we aggregate? Somebody has to be aggregator of this and make it more customized to the local needs of Ladakh, to the Karnataka, to Tamil Nadu, to Bihar. We need to do that. And I think that's a challenge, each one of us on this call, or maybe on the panel, other panels, has to kind of think about that. I think the collaborative effort between the government and the corporate sectors has really worked, because that's the only hope we had in the pandemic, right? However we talk about the government, I think they were the only savior for us. They were on the ground. Now, how do we corporates out here and the non-corporates who are working in this sector, if they can collaborate together, create an aggregator, and then kind of go with the solution, and each one of us kind of piggyback on that, kind of scale it on our own way, what Sujata is remarkably doing in Ladakh, nobody goes, what some of us are doing in different regions. If we can do that, I think we will be able to kind of move this, what we have already moved the baseline to the further to it. And I think it's a matter of time, maybe a couple of years, we would be able to kind of make it blended learning as a part of our life. Yeah, thank you.
Well said.
Great.
Well
No,
said.
this is very, very interesting. Should we go alphabetically, Ekta?
Yeah, sure, Gauri. So I think lots of learnings, lots of good stuff shared by everybody. I think I'd like to bring to the forefront some of the stuff that we've done at Samsung. So Samsung needs no introduction, but maybe a quick introduction in terms of it's the largest consumer goods MNC in India. We came to India 25 years back, and in the last 25 years, we've built 2 factories, we have 3 R&D centers, more than 70,000 employees across the country. I think when I say that, I also want to kind of remind everybody that the CSR spend statistics in India, which was, averaging around 20 to 25,000 crores per annum by both the listed and unlisted companies together. In that, approximately 1/5 of it has been spent on education over the years. It's one of the highest development sectors that get funding from all the corporates. So that means that all of us over here are in some way or the other contributing to make the education sector the area where we are all contributing a lot. So Samsung has been building these smart classes, smart schools that we call them now, since the last 5 to 6 years. The intent was that we collaborate with the government. We were targeting specifically the Jawahar Navodayas, which are schools that are residential schools for rural children. There are around 650 Jawahar Navodayas in India. These 650 schools had, children coming from rural India. 75% of the population is from rural India, and it's a residential school with a blend of both girls and boys living together. Now, when we started on this journey, the intent was really to provide universal access to education, high quality education. And that's when we started putting these Samsung flipboards, Samsung tablets, content that we used to, source to put into those tablets and into those flipboards, so that the students could get, access to the best of education that you can have. We also put, of course, Wi-Fi connectivity, etc., in these schools. This journey did not start because of COVID, but now I'm going to bring in the elements that could get leveraged during COVID, which really helped the students in rural India, thanks to this journey that we've been on. We've done around 600 plus schools till date. In these schools, what the teachers did was, when the pandemic happened, when it wasn't the complete lockdown situation, but the slight opening up of it, they came to the schools. So the first big win for us was that there was a ready-made setup where there was a Wi-Fi and there was a tablet or a flipboard that they could access. So there was no running around for that, right? As in, each class either had a tablet or a laptop, around 30, 40 of them, and a flipboard which is connected to the Wi-Fi. So that was the first win for Samsung, that at least the technology is already there for these teachers. The second big win for us was that these teachers were very comfortable with the technology. We know how many government schools and teachers struggled on both accounts, right? As in, one, technology was not there, and this comfort with technology was not there. So that was another big win for us, that the teachers were absolutely comfortable with the technology that they were using, because they've been using it for a couple of years and not something that got introduced because of COVID. Last but not the least, because this technology is really high end, wherein, as I said, it comes with loaded content, the best of material. So if you're studying a concept in maths or in science, it's explained very well. They used to use it. It was like, a blended learning already happening. They would annotate on that, teach through that. And, the students would kind of get a mix of both what the teacher would write on the blackboard plus what would be there in a video, because a flip is basically a blackboard, but a digital blackboard. So they did all that, and then they could also record all of it and then push it out to the students who did not have live access. So there were a bunch of students who had live access who could join these online classes. And there's a whole bunch, as we all know, that while there was availability of a mobile or a tablet, there was no availability of data or access during the school learning hours. So they could record it and send it out to them. So I think these three things were the ones that really stood out for us in our journey. We continue on the journey of smart schools. We continue to make more classes in the schools digital. That's our definition of Edtech. As Gouri rightly pointed out, Edtech means different things to different people. And we're looking to growing this, community of rural India, which has access to technology and the access to the best of education, because I think Edtech really has the ability to change the learning landscape of India, to provide universal access to the best quality education in India. So really, Samsung is playing its part in doing that bit. Thank you.
Thanks, Ekta. Prachi.
Thanks, Gouri. I'll continue from where Ekta left, is that really where we all collectively need to work, is that there is huge potential in Edtech, and let's make it to work. And in that, I would say that at least, what we are doing at the foundation is we are saying that, the Edtech solutions which are available out there, and, Central Square Foundation has done a ranking of them, has a repository of them. It's like 70-80% there probably. Maybe we don't have perfect solutions in Edtech available today, but we have solutions which are 70-80% there. Even with that, what we can achieve for our kids is huge. So while we continue with development of more relevant, cheaper, better solutions, a large amount of our effort is also going on making existing solutions work. One of the initiatives that we are working in that direction is Bharat Edtech Initiative, together with Give India and a host of other co-funders, where what we have done is we have brought to the platform a bunch of Edtech solutions. And in fact, we had used the Tulna framework. Central Square Foundation team was generous enough to give it to us before it was formally released. And it was super helpful because it gives you a framework in which, without the impact data, you can look at certain features in an Edtech solution to say, okay, this is what it should have for it to at least work. And does this Edtech solution have those features? So we use that. We use some of our partners' knowledge, and we selected a set of partners who were ready to work in this ecosystem. And he said, okay, let's make it available to 100,000 children in India, and let's keep nudging them and study very carefully what nudges work and what learning outcomes are achievable. In a year's time, mid somewhere next year, we'll have that data, and we'd love to share it with the ecosystem. It's one of the efforts in that direction, that at least let's collectively start sharing information, on what's working and what's not working, right? That's just as important. So, for example, we did a similar study in Haryana, where we did an RCT on smart classroom plus workbooks, just smart classroom, just workbooks, constructed. And we found that one-to-many solutions, smart classroom solutions actually do not have impact. And, we are putting it out for the, for everyone who's working on those type of solutions to work, to look at. So, so in terms of, your question on what's working, we've collectively shared a whole bunch of things which are working, make it at the child level, suit their device, accessibility pattern, validate it with the teachers. We had a program working where it's a spoken English program, and we thought there's huge demand for spoken English during this time. And what is the engagement of kids when it comes from the teacher and when it comes directly from the program, and much higher take-up comes from the teachers. So these are some of the things which we are finding are working in blended learning solutions. And like everyone spoke about, in addition to innovation and content and partnerships, which has emerged strongly during the pandemic, the digital readiness, and right now I'm not talking about hardware, just digital readiness, literacy, ease, familiarity, all of that is skyrocketed. And that's the opportunity for us, that, this happening. See, over a period of time, like Geo happened, other stuff will happen, devices will become cheaper, internet will get solved. And anyways, it's not in our collective skill set to be able to solve the problem. Let's solve for the problem that we can. Let's find ways in which kids will engage. Let's put out information, share between each other what's not working. And I hope I move from the, skeptic or wanting to be believer category very soon. This just needs more collective action from all of us.
Yeah.
Fantastic, Prachi. Sujata?
I think my colleagues said a lot of great things, all of which I agree with. I'll just make it like really short and crisp. I think we don't need more content. We don't need more ideas. We don't need more solutions. I think everything that is needed to be said, done, created, innovated is all there right now. Like you said, when you said 5,000 Edtech solutions, I'm pretty sure the numbers already climbed up in the last, since you spoke. But I don't think we need more of that. There is tons of amazing work that's done. And like Prachi just said, digitally we are ready. I mean, every village parent in the remotest village of Ladakh, Sikkim, Bangalore wants their child to have that mobile phone, to have that access to that content, is pulling their child away just so they can get tuitions or get better content and so on. What we need really is our existing solutions to work and work well. And first of all, I think we need to also define, what does working mean? Does working mean just adoption? Just working mean just giving a device or a content to a child? Do we know what learning outcomes mean? I think we need to define that. And I think the key thing here is we need to share. We're all done good stuff. We've done stuff because we've been lucky, we've been creative, we've had the opportunity, we've been there at the right place at the right time, or the wrong place at the right time, whichever you want to look at it. But can we put our solutions out there for people to share and take forward? And I think that's the big thing. Each in our own specific niche category or world that we are very good at, if we can take a few others along. So for example, I think with 17,000 feet, we realize we're one of the few, we're a very niche organization. We're one of the few who's working in that entire area. And our focus is to work, largely we're now looking at governments. We realize we don't have the potential to scale, at least not like Prachi rightly said. I mean, we can't be going around looking at, can we improve infrastructure of connectivity infrastructure. That's not in our hands. But yes, we are actively looking to advocate our solution or something similar to ours, which can reach out to areas with no connectivity or no electricity. We are looking to work with different edtech providers, or just not even different edtech providers, to also think of edtech providers and CSRs to actively look at areas which don't have internet. Our current partners, for example, they had an online solution and went and told them, look, you need to think about offline as well. Currently, right now, we're talking with some other, we're talking to Amazon to see, can Alexa be made to work in an offline mode so that children can get access to things. So actively propagating the need to look in areas which are not being looked at, actively working with other nonprofits to say, here is a solution. We're looking at ways in which to make our solutions cheaper as well, at least in terms of, if not the hardware, at least the, the software and the content and things like that. And yeah, we have to collaborate. We have to work with each other. That's the time right now. And if we all know what we are working towards, what is that end goal, we don't need to look very far. Everything is with us. This collaboration piece, I think we really need to work on, and collaborating with governments. I think collaborating with governments, I put a huge emphasis on, and Abhishek talked a lot about having a lot of success with governments, but it's still not to where it needs to be. So I think a lot more initiative needs to be put, even with smaller NGOs like ours, or it could be larger organizations like Prachi, MSDF or CSF and so on. If we can work with governments at this case, I think NGOs and CSRs have really done what they need to do. Can we take it to the next mile? So that's what we are looking at, and there's so much potential right here. Somebody somewhere build this huge pool of collective work that we can all take forward. Prachi, I'm nominating you.
Fantastic. That's a very positive note.
Accepted.
Sorry, what?
I'm saying delegation accepted.
Very good. That's very nice. Fantastic. So yeah, please.
Great. Sparsh, I wonder if we have time for one or two questions from the audience.
Yes, ma'am. We do have. Should I recite them or you want to take them yourself?
It would be helpful if you can help me with the question.
Sure, sure. So one question is by Ankita Agarwal. Her question is, the Braille literacy rate is less than 1% in India, while India is the blind capital of the world. This problem becomes even bigger due to the lack of availability of special tutors and the traditional process of teaching Braille being slow, as it requires personal attention. What is your take on this? Anybody can take up this question. It's not specified, so.
Yeah, any of the panelists would like to take this?
Abhishek, so you're not audible.
I'm working on two devices, so I have to mute here. So yeah, let me chime in here. I think I may not have the direct answer for what has been asked, but what I have seen working with the visually impaired students nowadays, that there are a lot of adoption happening for the audiobooks. So we have set up an audiobook, audio libraries and audio, recording studios with some of our nonprofit partners. And more younger students who are visually impaired, they are accepting and they're liking more to kind of hear those books which they need to read, because the conversion of Braille, it takes a humongous effort. It also takes not only effort but time, but I think audiobook recording is something is catching up. If anybody wants to kind of do an audiobook recording, you're most welcome. You can do remotely. It's all getting centralized repository created, and we'll be happy to kind of take 10 minutes of a small tutorial that how do you can make a talking book, right? So it's not just you speak, but you have to make it like you're talking to that person. So it's something catching up. So I don't have a direct answer, but it's something you want to work on this piece. I will be happy to collaborate with you.
Okay, sir, thanks a lot. The other question is, can skill development happen for certain trades to keep children interested, especially those who may not be able to have access of edtech solutions? After all, skill development ecosystem was developed to take care of students who were always school dropouts. What are your views on this?
Wow.
Go ahead, Sujata.
No, my first reaction was wow, actually. Interesting point, actually. You know what you said about skill developed to take care of students who were school dropouts. We're not dealing with school dropouts yet. At least that's the positive hope I want to take away, saying that yes, we stepped back by 3 grades. The current assessment that we did at our schools in Ladakh, I think our children specifically in the lower grades are almost 3 grades below. They've lost. But are they school dropouts yet? No, we don't know. But can skill development be taken up? Sure. I don't see why not, but I don't think this is an either or. I think skill development is a necessity. I think it's a must, but I think more focus should be added on to getting them back into school rather than teaching them. Unless you're talking about skill development through Edtech. I'm not very sure I follow that question, but I think if I've kind of misunderstood anybody, kind of feel free to jump in. But I think we need to be putting more emphasis on getting the children back into school and learning. That's, I think, the biggest crisis we're facing right now.
Prachi, you want to add?
Sure. So I'll add a couple of data points that we have. Is that one area where we have, and this is not specific to school dropouts, but this is specific to school-aged children, is that we have found that one of the skills which is eminently possible to do through online is English learning. And there, we have evidence that, again, engagement is kind of necessary in all education solutions, but that is one skill. It's not a trade-specific skill. That's one skill that can be picked up through online learning very well, and that, not just us, many organizations have data on that. In terms of, again, coming back to skills, where it's getting proven is that upskilling through digital edtech solutions is very much possible, and a lot of upskilling is happening through edtech successfully, and there is, again, evidence for that. What can be done first, because it's school dropouts, I don't know whether you mean like kids who now become youth, or I'm assuming these are working age children at least. But what we have found during the pandemic is that many states, and again Haryana, because we're closely associated, they pivoted their ITIs to a blended learning model, and they had very good, at least understanding developed in multiple trades, not just in one trade, multiple trades. They got very good impact in terms of the theoretical knowledge that kids have. They didn't innovate a lot on adding projects to them and giving them work from home kits. And I know there are many companies which are trying to do that. But what we did find is that the level of knowledge absorption about not just specific trades, many trades can also go up through that method. And I think which was not in the question is, but we are finding evidence of is that, it's very effective to do counseling and mentoring digitally. Because, otherwise you just don't get that quality of mentors when you're trying to do it offline. And, career counseling in order to, increase their selection of which trades they want to go to, or, what they need to prepare, those are several things which I think Edtech can. Gouri, I'm sure you, from your previous work, have a lot of evidence on that as well.
No, I think, both you and, Sujata has spoken very well to this question. I am also getting a nudge from the organizers to say that we are on time. I think we'll close here. In conclusion, all I say from what I've heard from the panelists, we remain optimistic that technology has the power to democratize the quality of education. And I think the tailwinds are strong, right? Clearly the intent is strong. And I think the journey has only just begun for all of us. So a long way to go, and we do remain positive. Thank you for being such a patient audience, and thank you panelists for your time and very valuable insights.